Howdy, this is Crystal Woods with Seasons in the Vine, and it's Fresh Friday, and I'm coming to you from my car because I'm at soccer practice, and I thought, well, let's just get this Fresh Friday in. I want to talk about capacity today because I've transitioned into the new season, and that transition period, that time between was really something, guys. It was really something. I ran many motors at the same time because I needed to. And I want to talk about capacity and when to know how to shift, when to know you're near the danger zone, how to protect yourself from getting burnout, from getting exhausted, from overextending yourself. And you really need to know your limits, because even though we live in a culture which makes it seem like we can have everything and everything is possible, that's a lie. That's a lie. There are choices that have to be made. There are decisions that need to be made. And often they are coming from a place of just having capacity. When we don't honor the capacity we have, we get into what we know of as burnout. And, oh, the lighting's a little better there. Let me shift. Okay, a little better. Not as many shadows. We get into the areas of burnout, and we know, we just want to quit everything. We shouldn't be going through cycles in our life where we're running every engine full capacity and every area of our lives is like full throttle, and then we get sick, we get stressed, we get shingles, we get whatever, and then it's like, okay, I have to quit everything. That kind of cycle is not the cycle of health. The cycle of health is being able to know when you have to get all your motors going, and then know how long you can live that way, and then shut it down once you need to shut it down, so that you remain healthy and you avoid the cycle of having to quit everything or end up having a breakdown or end out totally burnt out and quit everything because you've just so burnt every straw. So with that said, sorry it's so bumpy. It's just a little bit harder to do when you're not set up. I want to talk a little bit about this season. So I went into, I was working in full-time ministry with Seasons in the Vine. Then the Lord called me out of that into a pastoring position. And so I knew eventually there was going to have to be like a hard switch, but I was like in process with people. And I really felt the Lord was just like, trust me with how this is going to merge. Trust me with how this is going to go. And be careful, be mindful, and do it. Like, I will give you the energy to do it. And what's interesting is thinking back, when I launched Seasons in the Vine in 2020, that was a season that was really high energy too. I was worship leading at a church every Sunday. So in a very active ministry role there. I was working with Seasons in the Vine sessions during the week, and I was writing the first Bible study. I'm in the 5th year of the Bible study now, but I was writing the first one while teaching it. So it was like there was a lot of hours. One thing that never happens for me is I don't sacrifice sleep for work. I work from, if I have to get up early, like from dawn to dusk, or but I don't let sleep be interfered by work. And so there's something about just knowing that parameter. That's a boundary I won't cross, because for me, as soon as my sleep is interrupted or I start getting less, I don't do well. And I know me, that affects my capacity. I don't do well. And so that's an area that I just don't cross into. So like if I don't run up to deadlines like that. I have deadlines, and then I push way back all the goals I need to meet way before I even get there, so that I'm never up against that line. And also when the spontaneous happens or the crisis happens or whatever, like I'm available because I already have those deadlines met. Okay, so take from that what you will, that little tip. But I do not let work interrupt my sleep. I won't sacrifice that. So that might already just be a boundary some of you need to make when it comes to capacity. Like if I have to pull in, like I've never pulled an all-nighter, and I have done all the college papers, all the master's program papers, written Bible studies, done events. I don't pull all-nighters. The only time I'm up all night is if the Lord wants me praying all night or something else is going on that I need to be, but it's not going to be work related. So keep that in mind. And maybe that's a boundary for you today. One of the things though I remembered about that first year with Seasons in the Vine, 2020 into 2021, is the Lord said, I'm going to give you a grace to get through this. And then suddenly there was a day that he was like, okay, the grace is up to do this. Now build in a rhythm. Look at your calendar, build in a rhythm, build in parameters around your events. When you do a weekend event, take off worship on Sunday at church. Start giving yourself rest, like intentional rest. So for those years, it looked like having an event was not worship leading the next day and also not teaching Bible study on Monday nights, because that's what I do during the whole ministry years. I teach Bible study on Monday nights. So those were some ways to build in that safeguard, those boundaries, so that I could stay high capacity and function. Now, this last season, I am doing pastoral visits, like intense, regular, like 6, 7 a week, possibly. It was a lot. And then meeting with clients, full load, and still homeschool, wife, mom, all the things. So it was really intense. And there were times where I was like, this definitely can't last long. And I knew the Lord was saying that. But for a moment, you need to do this, because you have to trust me that I'm going to give you what you need to stretch your energy, to stretch your days out. And again, my sleep was not interrupted for that. It was daylight hours, right? Like work hours is when it happened, and then it was done and I would at least sleep. But while those moments of awake were happening, they were full, to the point where like about every minute had to be accounted for to get everything done and meet all the deadlines. Because also I'm writing a sermon every week. So you just think about it. So 2 full-time jobs at the same time. And some of you are like, yeah, I've had to do 2 full-time jobs. And you know what I'm talking about when you reach that place of like capacity. So another thing that I've done is I have people that monitor me, that check in on me. People were very aware that I was in a really high intense work period. And it was, farmers, they have to pull long hours when they have to pull long hours. Like when you have to get the work done, you just have to do it. And that's really the pressure that I felt. And I knew it wasn't going to be forever, but for a time, girlfriend is going to work, because that's what she needs to do, because like you got to strike while the iron's hot. And I needed to plow the field when it was time. If we're going to see a harvest, we've got to actually be putting the seed in at the right time. And so in that, I knew there was a grace again to really push it. But one of the things, as I was going to say, is I have people that check in on me. People knew my schedule, and I also have over shepherds. So I made a post last week about John and Linda Szymanski, and they had wellness assessments and questions to ask me, and they were monitoring. And one of the things that they told me was, it's okay to run really, really, really hard for a season. The season can't become your permanent. The season can't become your everyday, because that's when you do end up with burnout, and you have to work within your gifting. And so like, I have to know I'm in my wheelhouse with what I'm doing. And when I am, there's not as much expenditure either. And so I have a lot of capacity for certain things, but then in areas where it really wasn't my wheelhouse, or it's not my highest gifting, that's where I would feel the most exhaustion. That's where I would begin to be like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know how long I can do this. But trusting the Lord that when the time came to execute the full transition, it would be the right time. He would tell me, and he would get me to that point. So all that to say, capacity doesn't mean it always stays the same. You have moments and seasons, because God says, where he will give you the power to run ahead of Ahab, right? You tuck up, you gird your loins, you tuck up, and you take off, and you run and you run and you run under that spiritual wind until you're done running. You plow that field, you do the work, you get the harvest in, whatever it is God's calling you to do. But then stop and get your parameters back in place. Get your rhythms of rest back in place. Jesus is the Sabbath rest. What that means is Sabbath is no longer a day. It is life in Christ. That means I rest when he says to rest. I work when he says to work. And I do everything from that place of him being my rest. He's leading me and he's guiding me. So then as soon as this really hard transition shifted into September, and I left one behind fully and came all the way over, suddenly I have these beautiful rhythms again. I'm almost bored some days because I was working so hard for 8 months and then it was done. It was over. And now I have one job. It's a full job. It's a full-time job, but it's one job. And I'm doing the things I love again. So I have that. I made it through. And that's what I want to say, because I knew I wasn't going to do it long term, because I know what happens when we do things long term that are not what God's calling us to do, when we stay in the game too long. Nothing is worse than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so you want to be in rhythm with Jesus in what you're supposed to be walking. And so shifted into this other season, and it's sweet, guys. There's people driving by. I have time to take seminary classes. So I took a class this week on the Ark of the Covenant and the presence of God and what worship is in the Old Testament, and how David is a prototype to Christ, and so good. And I'm just loving the fact that I made it through the time of plowing. I made it through that time of intense working. And now I'm back into my regular rhythms. My capacity has been honored. I was stretched out, as the Lord said, and then I'm back into a good rhythm. But I know everything is a season. So at any time, as the Lord commands and leads, it could vamp up again, because it's time to harvest, or it's time to weed, or it's time to do something. And in those moments, you kick it back in. You're trusting that as long as you're walking with Him, you won't enter into burnout, because you're doing what He wants you to do when He wants you to do it. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Just things I've been really remarking about. This is recent, just the last week. I've just been really enjoying getting through that season. It was really, really, really intense. And I felt the weight and the pressure, and I felt fringy. Like I felt thin. Like, whew, I know I can't do this much longer. Yet the Lord was like, I will sustain you until you're done. And He sure did. And now I'm entering back into that beautiful rhythm that I know is good for me, and it matches my regular capacity without the supernatural help. So take that to wherever. Take it to the Lord, not wherever. Take it to the Lord. Process it out. See if you have a rhythm of rest. Do you even know what rest looks like for you? How do you avoid burnout? Do you have people monitoring you and making sure that you are healthy? Are you working within your gifting? Are you primarily running all of your engines full steam ahead in multiple directions? You just don't want to live that way, guys. You'll end up sick. It's not what God's required. You might have a season of it, but you're not going to have a permanency of it. And so see what the Lord might say for you about everything I just shared. See if there's any connections. Much love. I'll see you next week. Maybe I'll be back in the office next week. I don't know. We'll see.